These are children's responses to Cheng Cheng-Huang's A Familiar Strange Land Circle series, a project I conducted in May 2019. More details about this project will be provided later. I will first introduce Cheng Cheng-Huang, a Taiwanese contemporary artist whom I have personally known for almost 30 years. The following presentation is based on my long time tracking of his development, two of his published catalogs, artwork images provided by him, and several interviews with him. Majoring in Western art at Chinese Culture University in Taipei, Cheng Cheng-Huang explored his potential in visual art in the late 1980s. The facilities in the art department, the variety of choices in the curriculum, and the quality of the faculty were all very limited at that time. Students usually formed their own dynamic study groups to share and discuss their ideas or dreams about art, aesthetics, careers, and contemporary movement in the field. These informal student-led groups help the young artists develop independent or critical thinking and problem-solving skills that influence their career development later. Cheng Cheng-Huang drove a taxi in Taipei to make a living for several years after graduating from college. In between fairs, he drew comic strips and sold them to subculture magazines. When he was driving, he observed his passengers and created their imaginary characters to be included in his comic narratives. Through this job, he observed people and learned many stories about them and their urban lifestyles. In his art, he then transferred these stories into his life quest and developed a series of works raising questions about existence. The lifting of martial law in 1987 gave the Taiwanese people opportunities to practice democracy. Since then, a series of social or political movements introduced concepts of diversity and postmodernism into the visual arts in Taiwan. For freedom of speech empowered artists to explore their creative activities, including critical or politically sensitive subject matter, which had previously been prohibited. With the freedom of press, all types of information about visual arts around the world became available in publications. With rich sources in literature, philosophy, and art theory, artists had the opportunities to go beyond the conservative concepts, subjects, and techniques learned in art schools and to try out something considered contemporary. For example, mixed media, installation, audio-video art, performance, or interactive technology. Artists had been respectfully recognized as creative professionals. Being part of the big wave of this movement, Cheng Cheng-Huang had the courage to add and experiment with many new components in his art. He emphasized critical issues in a modern and developed society by using a meditative and self-reflective approach to make art. He made a series of work criticizing traffic inconvenience caused by the construction of Taipei subway system, election bribery, and violence. All topics related to his experience as a taxi driver and a comic artist. However, because the images he created required a critical reaction from the viewers unaccustomed to art with direct political messages, the viewers were not prepared nor ready to take such challenges in many cases. So Cheng Cheng-Huang shifted his imagery development to an indirect approach in which he invented many creatures combining animal and human forms to symbolize his criticism, which was then very well received. During the same period, he started to learn about Buddhism and applied some of its fables to his human-animal creatures. The purpose of using such concepts was to connect his understanding of Buddhism with his personal or visual experience. Thus, the process of creating such images became art therapy for him. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, Cheng Cheng-Huang received several prestigious awards and invitations to exhibitions in major art museums in Taiwan. He was recognized by art critics and curators because his art reflected many of the current life and cultural styles in Taiwan. He continued to study Buddhism and included its concepts in his compositions to examine the constant changes of life. He realized that all these changes were uncertain factors in his art because he could not capture any moment at the precise or correct moment and transfer it into a picture. Instead, he had to collect fragments of his imaginary images from the constantly changing moments to present his visual narrative over a period of time. For this meditation on life, he found that the best process was woodcutting. He incised images into inked wooden panels, leaving the natural wood colors to symbolize uncertainties in nature and society that people have to accept and respect. In his works during early 2010s, he personalized pop cultural icons and images and combines them with traditional Chinese landscapes, an easily recognizable art form in Taiwanese society, to present many layered, spiritually meditative, and surreal compositions that invite viewers to the impossibly difficult task of self-reflection. He described his artistic development as a process of studying Buddha's life quest. He defines this development with the following 6 phases. Existence of materials. Cheng Cheng-Huang composes multi-layered images to show his perspective about significant phenomena currently taking place in the world, for example, war, violence, or social justice. However, he believes that the images he created are just the surface of the reality and can reflect only what he sees or what he thinks. Viewers not only should look at the images, but they also need to find their own ways to inquire about the meanings or messages behind these images. Following this concept, Cheng Cheng-Huang adapts sutra and Buddhist fables to illustrate his interpretations of impermanence. He develops a series of works consisting of surreal creatures to acquire meanings behind the images. He finds that through the process of imagery development, his vision or idea of a creature constantly changes. He realizes that time as a type of dimension in visual art is the factor of this uncertainty, and this uncertainty directly relates to impermanence. In Cheng Cheng-Huang's art, chaos often appears as the theme in his compositions. In many of his works, small-scale human shapes filling all over the large-scale landscape suggest his nervousness, uncertainty, anxiety, and concern about human society or environmental condition. He purposely uses this type of compositions to seek the sources of the chaos. This is how Cheng Cheng-Huang reflects the Buddhist concept of connection. Unlike traditional Eastern Asian art, in which an empty space usually symbolizes many types of existence, commonly indicating air, clouds, or background, Cheng Cheng-Huang carefully develops the background of his works into wood carving patterns of concentric circles, a symbol of the universe. The universe in some of his works shows emptiness or unreality. In other words, the landscapes or contents in or surrounded by the universe pattern unreality. This method challenges its viewers to contemplate what exactly they have seen, recognized, or understood, going beyond the metaphysical level to examine the philosophical and spiritual existence of the sense. The 5 series is his interpretation of Buddha's life. He tries to use visual narratives to describe Buddhist core concepts or belief. The compositions of this series are either from the bird's eye view or a horizontal perspective. That is, the compositions always contain a holistic view of the globe, the universe, or a land or island. In these works, Viewers are considered as superior beings observing the detailed contents of the pictures, as if Buddha is watching over the material world. The last and most recent series Cheng Cheng-Huang created contains a special feature, a big eye looking at or peeking into his landscape paintings. This eye has two layers of symbolism. One is his own eye that is always looking at the world from a third person's perspective, as if he is not part of the world or universe reflected in the art he creates. The other is God's eye that is always secretly watching the world and its people, while the people are not aware of it. Cheng Cheng-Huang purposely reduces the inclusion of Buddhism in his art to make it become more universal. With this effort, the new landscape compositions are like fantasy wonderlands. I am curious about how children react to his recent works and speculate that children's imagination may lead them to explore his art in different ways. Therefore, I conducted a 3-phase project with a group of 4th grade Taiwanese children earlier this year. In the first phase, I asked them to describe what they see and how they feel about Cheng Cheng-Huang's works. Their responses were very direct. Many of them expressed negative feelings about the images. These include feelings of loneliness and scare of evil creatures. I then asked children to interpret Cheng Cheng-Huang's art to further develop images based on his works in the second phase, to examine how much they are able to make sense of the contents in Cheng Cheng-Huang's work, not only within the picture itself, but also beyond what they see in the content. The final phase is to have the children share with each other their stories derived from their interpretation of Cheng Cheng-Huang's works. I divided the class into 6 groups, and each group was asked to provide a narrative description on a piece of Cheng Cheng-Huang's art. Most of them used their life experiences or some moral lessons they learned from other classes to show their understanding of the images in Cheng Cheng-Huang's works. Here is a sample. Cheng Cheng-Huang often says that his works contain multiple layers of contrast. He uses traditional ink, brushes, and woodcutting tools, but adapts Western techniques. He follows Western concept of compositions, but wants to create art with Asian aesthetics. He develops very detailed and complex imageries, but the overall compositions are simple. He wants to present easy-to-read pictures, but each image always leads to multiple ways of interpretation. He bases on Buddhist concepts, but challenges viewers to go beyond Buddhism. When looking at Cheng Cheng-Huang's works, viewers must sensitively follow the narratives or pictorial movements to learn symbolic meanings within or behind images. This viewing experience is private, quiet, individual, and enclosed so that every viewer develops a unique interpretation of Cheng Cheng-Huang's works.